trying to end the war, but also these huge conversations around, do we create such a horribly destructive thing? Can you still hear me online?
Yes.
Peter, can you hear me online?
Yes.
Okay. And so 91 miles from there, if you go turn at Socorro and head out Route 60 going west, you come to this, the Very Large Array, which is a field of gigantic radio telescopes that it's pretty impressive. They're massive. They're kind of on a Y. And these things, they can spread them out on their own railroad tracks. And so they can move them kind of railroad tracks in different positions. And then focusing them in different directions and aiming them in different spots, they could search through using radio waves, the cosmos. You see, if you go there, there's a tiny little shack. You can drive up to this, believe it or not. And there's usually some tiny little radio telemetry shack. Most of it's now transmitted around the world. But there's usually some very bored graduate student who's desperate to talk to anyone when they come in the door because they've been sitting for hours using these radio telescopes. But I always found this kind of for me, almost a spiritual side. This idea that 91 miles away from the area where we dropped the first atomic bomb, these humans have gathered, created this highly expensive field array that's kind of just searching the universe for information. And that says a lot about who we are as people, right? Both our capacity for destruction and our quest for truth, for answers, to understand who we are in the cosmos, why we matter, what this is all about. And I love that journey. I have to tell you that for me, that's part of the reason why I went into science eventually, left philosophy and went into science, because I wanted to use all the tools that are available to me. But finding truth is often a very subtle thing. It's not like you can just find it suddenly. It's not like it's screaming right there. It's really kind of buried beneath the layers. And that's the problem we often have, is how to seek that, kind of this both humility of being able to do this, but the resolve that let's just keep going, humans. Let's just keep trying to figure out what all this means and not give up and drop bombs on one another. And so, in this world of kind of distractions that we see, trying to find that signal in the noise, to try to find what is the meaningful piece that we can weave together, and really to reflect on that and to discern what it means and to figure out our place in the cosmos. It's such a powerful experience to some of us. And I love this time of the year because it's gotten dark earlier and you can look outside. Have you been watching Jupiter go right across the constellation of Orion, which has been absolutely spectacular? Just such a beautiful night to just see the stars when we can. And so that's what it is. It's just this chance for us to be patient, to be open-minded, to confront and be willing to confront some things that make us uncomfortable. And yet in this, find this kind of signal, this thing about what the meaning of life is and how we can connect to it. So welcome. It's so great to see all of you this morning.
I am now going to turn it over to our leader, Curt Collier. Curt has been a leader in the ethical culture movement for more than 20 years. He's served as the leader for 4 different societies and now serves as consulting leader for 2 more, the Silicon Valley and the Austin societies. He has been a community planner with the National Park Service, running jobs programs for youth around the country, helping to restore our national parks. He is most recently now a professor of ethics and philosophy at Fairleigh Dickinson University. And I'm very glad to say he is the leader of the Ethical Culture Society of Bergen County. So please welcome Curt Collier.
Wordle at 3 a.m. is crazy. You should wait till 4 a.m. with the rest of us, which is usually when I play it. So you get in some kind of a little traffic mishap or something like that, and you have to go before a judge. What time of the day should you go? When they're open. So Daniel Kahneman, who's one of the books I'm going to be talking about called Noise, looked at those questions, looked at hundreds of kind of examples of that. And he found out that if you go early in the morning, the judge tends to be somewhat lenient. But then right before lunchtime, they tend to get much more severe in their punishment. And then after lunch, you could do pretty good again until about the end of the day, and then they start to get severe again. So why do judges met out harsher penalties right before lunch than they do earlier in the morning?
They're hungry.
They're hangry. Now, it's ridiculous to think that we would have a judicial system that was based on whether or not the judge got to eat a candy bar or something like that. But in fact, that's what we have. Human judgment is extremely noisy. When he studied people who went before physicians, when he studied all kinds of ways and patterns of which people were required some kind of a judgment, everything from your home appraisal to whatever, they found that people were all over the place, even within the same judge or within the same evaluator. We are extremely noisy, as he called it, noise, in our judgments. We're all over the place. And actually, who you are in the morning is very different than the person you are in the afternoon, and very different than the part before evening time. And the researchers have shown this again and again and again, that we are actually not that very consistent, which is kind of startling when you think about that we all think of ourselves as very smart, very rational people. But we're going to show some of the kind of the problems that we think. Daniel Kahneman, so this is the guy right here who wrote this very, very good book, which I can barely see. Right, he's a emeritus professor, or was at Princeton University, received the Nobel Prize in economics in 2002, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2013. Some of you may have already read his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, if you know that book. Highly recommend it. But this became a book that I was very, very interested in, because when I think about human decisions, everything including ethics, how we decide what we're going to do, how we treat other people, how compassion is, varies from hour to hour. And you would think you would not necessarily want that kind of a thing. So we're just going to do a couple little of the experiments that he mentions in this book. And we're just going to kind of test some of his theories right here in the room. So we're going to hand out these little slips of paper to everybody. And those of you who are online, can you grab a pen and a piece of paper real quick? Pass some of those down, please. Pass some of those down. You didn't know you're going to be tested. Those who don't pass will have to stay after class. Take some of those. Got some right there. Everybody needs a little piece of paper, and hopefully those online have done the same thing. Now, without saying anything, I want to make sure, wait, Eric's handing out pens and pencils. David, you want one of these? There you go. You want to participate in this? All right. I'm going to let Eric also get his phone out and bring up your calculator. So without discussing this, I want you to write down a number for me. And the number is, what percentage of the world's airports are in the United States? Think of all the airports around the world. What percentage, I tried to find something you all knew, what percentage of the world's airports are in the United States? So I just want you to write down a number really quickly. What? What percentage of the world's airports are in the United States?
Are these commercial airports only?
What percentage of the world's airports? I love working with people at the Ethical Society. They're always 3 steps ahead of you. All right, everybody wrote down a number? All right, I'm going to take about, let's take about 10 in the room, and we'll take maybe 5 online, okay? So just raise your hand if you think you know the answer. Raise your hand. And, okay, Jim.
Just a guess, 52%.
52. 15.
15?
Oh, 50. 75. 30. 25. 10. 40. Wait, how many is that? I think that was, I should have been counting with my fingers.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
7. 3 more, Dan. 20. 28. 90. And let's take 5 online. David.
2%.
2. Teresa.
I wrote 30.
30.
I'll say
Rich.
35%. I said 10.
10. Dan.
I said 10 also.
10. And
I'll say
that's
35%.
15, is that right?
No, we need one more.
One more online.
35%.
35. Okay. So what is the average of all of that?
33.8.
33.8. So let's write down that answer.
I did that in my head.
Now, the answer, of course, according to Daniel Kahneman in his book, is we said 33.8. The answer is 32%. So, which points out something he says in the book quite frequently, that the wisdom of the crowd is actually pretty good. That if you ask people a bunch of stuff and they throw all the answers out, people are kind of all over. But eventually, if you keep doing this pattern over a while, that people are actually fairly accurate, even if something is obscure about that. You're obviously all processing this information. You're thinking about airports. Some of you said commercial versus, small little, tiny little airports and communities and things like that, or military and things like that. You're processing through this information. And when people do that, they're actually pretty successful. Now I'm going to ask you to write down a different number, okay? And this one is, what is the average household income in New Jersey? What is the average household income in New Jersey? Now, before you write down a number, I want to hear some discussion in the room about this. So I'm going to take about 3 in the room, 3 and maybe 4, and then we'll take some online. What do you think it is, and why do you think that is? Okay, so who wants to take a shot at that? What do you think is the average household income in New Jersey? Or we can start online if anyone thinks they know the answer. No Googling it, y'all, online. That's not fair. Anyone?
Who wants?
Come on, throw it out there. What do you think it is? Okay, Michelle.
All right, Michelle will hazard a guess.
I would say 88,000.
88,000
per year. Okay.
$88,000 is the household income.
I'm not writing these down.
I'm writing them down.
Okay, good.
Jim?
I would say something like 65,000 because of the pockets of poverty in South Jersey.
Okay. Pockets of poverty in South Jersey. Anu?
70.
Any reason? How you came up? Any discussion about how you came up with that number?
It's like knowing how expensive the things are, and you see around that most people who are working in
Yeah, get them out. Sorry.
people who are working in places like Safeway, I still call it Safeway, Stop and Shop, and places like that, at least 2 people are working. Sometimes people are doing 2 jobs, so it sounds like it's around that.
And previous people have said, well, given the pockets of poverty in the room, that's why some people put that as lower. Han? And why?
75%, and I have the same reason as Anouk.
Okay, same reasons as Anu. Okay.
75,000. Do we
Anyone
want to
else
take
in
some
the
on?
room? Orion, and then we're going to take some, then I'll turn to the people online.
I'm going to take it lower, say about 45,000.
Combined household income?
Combined household income.
45,000.
We
Okay.
have a lot of people who live near New York, but we also have a lot of people who live in bleak urban settings and rural center settings. So.
Okay, let's take those online. So I'm going to start with Dan.
Yeah. So, being the nitpicker that I am, I'm first going to ask a question. Do we mean median or mean?
He's asking the me. Do you teach statistics, by the way? The answer is yes. Median or mean? Let's go with let's go with the mean because that's the question. What is the average?
If we're going with the mean, I'm going to go up to around 100,000 as a rough guess.
Okay, 100,000 is a rough guess. Very good. And then David?
I'll go with 90,000 as the mean.
Okay. And then Teresa?
I would say about 65,000 because there are a lot of single person households and we're an affluent group. So
okay.
I think we aim too high. I'll say 65,000.
Okay, and one more online. Yes, Gail?
I was going to say 45,000 because of just all the issues of the unseen people that are struggling out there.
Okay, do you have all those?
I do. What do we have 15? Or no, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, I'm going to divide that. And we have
64,300. So we
very
said
good.
We said an average of 64,300. The average household income in New Jersey is $135,170. Well, combined household income. So if you have two people working, things like that. Now, there's always a qualifier. Go ahead. Hold on, use the mic. Use the mic.
No, I think that even though we said average, all of us were thinking about median. That's the
median, a median most, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we were thinking. I believe.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll give you a half-point credit for that on the test when I'm grading. Between median, so your average is literally the average. So let's say you have two people at $300,000, but 10 of them at let's say $1,000. The median, I mean, the average is going to be something, but the median is like a middlemost score. What is the median point of the middlemost score, which is closer to that? However, it points out something. You were literally 1.8% off when I asked you not to deliberate, but when you deliberated, you were way off. Way off. And according to Daniel Kahneman in his book, that is typically what happens. Now, if we had been census takers, and let's say we were professionals or experts in census or did that kind of work, we would probably be way more accurate. But once again, when people deliberate, their scores go down. Our ability to be correct goes way up. Now, deliberating, people who are not professionals and this kind of stuff. So when we deliberate together, our scores go worse. And what Kahneman says is this is the kind of problem we have with making decisions when we're with large numbers of people. We need large numbers of people to provide us with information. But for some reason, when I asked you just write down the answer and don't talk, you were we came closer to that than when we deliberated. And there are several different reasons for that. There are several what he called biases that start happening as soon as people begin to speak. All right, as soon as some people begin to open their mouth and they give their reasons for good stuff, it changes the way you perceive even the same numbers. So, for example, one of the things we called anchoring, that when someone started to talk about poverty, probably in several people's minds, they suddenly said, oh, poverty makes sense to me. I'm going to lower my average score because that's called anchoring bias, which is where we respond to the kind of first bits of information that we have. There's also some really interesting things like bandwagon effects and things like that, which kind of kick in quite a bit. And this is the thing that Daniel Kahneman is talking about in his book, is how do we arrive at much better decision making? Now, you would think that the bandwagon effect would not be a very powerful effect. You know, you would probably think, no, I don't, as soon as somebody says something, I'm not going to do that. But the bandwagon effect is extremely powerful. They did the experiment, of course, of where people came to the room and there were 3 red dots on a bulletin board. And all these people came into the room and they said, what are all these blue dots doing up there? And then someone said, yeah, I was wondering what the blue dots were as well. And they were kept going on and on about the blue dots. Now, they then asked someone about this question. Let's say we asked Jim, and Jim says, I don't know why these blue dots are here either. Now, everybody else in the room was a shill. They were supposed to say blue, even though they all said red. You would think then that Jim would go, what the hell are you talking about? Those are not blue dots, they're red dots. But in a huge number of cases, people said, I don't know what those blue dots are either. How did we get so easily changed by even what a bunch of people said that we start even doubting our own sense of reality in that? How is that even possible that we change things that we know to be true as soon as we do that? We're going to try another little bit of kind of test here. Yes, sir?
What about the role of influencers?
Well, so we're going to get to the role of influence because influencers have a massive impact. My favorite one is where they had a person go into the room. They said, listen, come in with me. I'm going to give you a test. They came in and say, listen, I'm going to be right outside the door. If you need me, just come outside the door. And then the test taker walked off. And then the person's there taking a test. But over here, underneath a curtain or by that, suddenly some smoke started to go out. In the vast majority of cases, the person then got up, went over there, and asked, hey, said, there's some smoke coming out. You may want to look at this. Then they repeated the experiment, and again, with 5 people in the room. Smoke, once again, if y'all need me, I'm right outside the door. Suddenly some smoke comes out. They all notice the smoke, and they all start telling it then. How many times did they go to the test taker? Hardly any time. What is it about us that we change our decisions even based by the number of people in the room and the impact it had? We are highly influenced in our decision making by all kinds of things. You ready for your next little test? I want you to write down the last 2 digits of your Social Security and your bank account number for me. No. Write down, what is the last 2 digits of your Social Security number? Write that down. And those online, write down, what is the last 2 digits of your Social Security number? The only person going to see that is you. Now, you go to a restaurant, it's not too big a fancy event, but you just want to celebrate with a nice bottle of wine. How much are you going to pay for a good bottle of wine in a restaurant? Right? How much you want to pay for, so write down that number, how much you want to pay for a good bottle of wine in a restaurant. Just keep that down here for a second. Now, I'm going to ask for several answers in the room. Who wants to go? How much are you going to pay? Okay, Diane, what's your last 2 digits of your social? 23. And how much for a good bottle of wine? 30. Okay, who else? Yep. 84. Oh, well, that's cheating. I'm sorry. We're going to let through that. But what would you think if you had to buy $50? Okay. All right.
I thought you were French, Nadej.
Yeah, French. Don't drink. Get out. All right.
69.
Is your Social Security number?
And
30. Okay.
32 and 37.
Uh-huh. Yep. 65 and 50. Okay. 93 and 27. Okay. Yep.
71 and 40.
71 and 40.
41 and 30.
41 and 30.
31 and 40.
31 and 40. And then I need some people to raise their hands online so I can see.
Okay.
43 and 20. Anyone else?
30, 97.
30 and 97 for a good bottle of wine. Wow. I'm going to eat at her house. Okay, Teresa.
Last two digits are 86, and
86.
I would pay about $36 for a bottle of wine.
36. Gail.
78 and 30.
78 and 30. More. Come on, David. David, we're all looking at you. Kate?
Which number comes first?
So last two digits of your social?
29.
29?
And 27.
27? And anyone else online? Last two digits of your social? Dan, you want to take a shot at that? Nope. Doesn't want to give out private information. Yes, Alice.
18 and 30.
18 and 30. Very good. Thank you, Alice.
Kurt, I have a correction.
Yes.
Reverse it. 30, 97. So she's 97 and the bottle is 30.
Oh, you the 97 and ball of 30.
Her taste isn't that expensive.
I was like, you said. I'm cheap.
So this is a little bit more complex. Thank you for writing these down. But this is a little bit more complex. But the idea is that people whose Social Security numbers, if you were to ask just to write down a number, and that number was something less than 50, your answer for your bottle of wine was probably under $50. Whereas if you're greater than 50 on Social Security, more likely they were going to have there. Now, we see that the only people who responded over here were that, but it also shows that nobody over here on this side said for those numbers. And so this is what's called the sequencing effect, that the number that you hear right before that, because you're making a judgment right after that, is going to be influenced by the number that you just saw. So how is it possible that when they repeat these experiments 1,000 times and over and over and over again, that we get influenced by things which don't have anything really to do with this? This is what he called by noise, that noise in our judgments. When Newt Gingrich, do y'all remember him? A lovely guy. So Newt Gingrich, I told you the story once that he wanted to know what Americans thought about the Republican Party, but he thought it of a different way. He says, when people think in the United States of political parties, who is the most strong for defense? Who is the most pro-family? Who is the most pro-family, pro-life, strong defense, arguing for low crime and those kinds of stuff? And he actually found that Americans are pretty much, I think it's the Democrats, I think it's the Republicans. And he thought that had to change. So what he did is he wrote a letter to everyone in the Republican Party, all the leaders, and he said, listen, there are certain words I want you to include in every speech. Pro-family, pro-defense, pro-Marxy. I want you to put these in there as much as you can. We call that now the glittering generalities. And suddenly, in about that time in the 1980s, we started to hear the same mantra repeated again and again and again of the pro-defense, pro-family, pro-life group being tied to the Republican Party. Newt Gingrich then went and asked Americans which party was pro-life, pro-American, pro-defense. Who do you think they said? They said the Communist Party. Get out. So once again, the Republican Party. And so how is it possible that people who had said, well, before that didn't have any kind of influence at all, but now it does, which comes back to your thing about the influencers and how much influencers can have on shaping our opinion. Once again, because the anchoring effect and several different kinds of things that happen on there. Now, sometimes these are really, really big problems. We have to think about these things. I want you to think, we all know that the federal government has gotten really, really big. It's bloated. The question is how much bigger is the federal government today than it was in 1986? So write down the number. What percentage do you think the federal government has gotten really big? And to what extent is it bigger than the government was in 1986? Write down that number.
How do you define big? and bigger.
How much bigger, larger number of staff, more bloated, more hires, more staff, right? That's the thing that we
More
have to deal with.
not budget.
We're saying that not the budget, just how much bigger is our staff today than what it was? No, Jim, no anchoring, no, all right? So how much bigger is the federal government today than it was in 1986? Now,
and you're just talking a percentage bigger.
a percentage, because we're talking about the fact that we need to slash the federal government. It's gotten too big, it's too bloated. So the question is, how much bigger was it since 1986? And so we'll take a couple of answers on here and in the line and go from there. So,
am I calculating these again?
No.
Okay,
no.
good.
Do you think it's the same?
Jerry
Yes.
says the same. All right.
You think it's less today?
Nadej says less. Okay. Anu?
Minus 10.
Minus
You think it's gotten
10%.
smaller than it was in 1986?
Jim?
Anyone else?
I'd say it's minus 20%.
Minus 20%?
Minus 20.
David?
You're muted, David.
Sorry,
If you
I'd
hold
say
up
it's
your
the
fingers,
same.
we can get the
The
number.
same.
The same.
Mm-hmm.
Peter, go ahead.
I think it's significantly less, probably 30 to 40% less.
Okay, 30 to 40% less.
Now, here's the interesting thing, right? Thank you for doing this. The problem, you all cheated because you read the New York Times where this article just came out. So, don't give me that. So, according to the New York Times, there were 2.96 million civilians, including postal workers, getting full-time paychecks from the federal government at the end of 1984. Before Ramaswamy was born, and there are before he was born, there are approximately 2.87 million federal workers today. In fact, the number of federal workers in the United States has been almost exactly the same since 1961. But if you constantly say that the federal government has gotten bloated, and you hear it again and again and again, once again, that got anchored in people's minds, and then you tell something which is not true long enough, and by the way, it's still a lie. But the fact is that even though you hear the same kind of information over and over again, people believe that there must be some truth to that, right? Which is the difficulty we have at introducing so much noise into the system and not relying on other kinds of information. Did you want to add something, Mark?
I wanted to ask, if it's the same, but the population.
Yep. The population in 1984 was 240 million people. The population today is 334 million people, which means we've gone up by, 100-something million people, and yet the size of the federal government has remained exactly the same. So once again, that we get these kind of rhetoric, this kind of stuff that this gets repeated again and again and again. You would think it would never work on anyone, but it works again and again. So this is the point that of this kind of stuff. Human judgment is extremely noisy, and we get influenced by all kinds of information, even the way the information gets presented, how you set it up. We call that frame setting in social activists. So when I walk in the room, the first thing I want to do is I want to set a frame. I want to describe the situation. I want that kind of anchored. But I also want to make sure that I may have to go in and reshift the frame for some people to move that kind of stuff in there. The question is why do we do that? Why do humans are so noisy in our judgment? Why are we so heavily influenced by lots of different factors? Now, according to researchers and people like Robert Sapolsky and others, we know that our heart takes about 7% of our energy on a daily basis. 7% of our energy from our daily intake and outtake of energy is spent on our heart. Kidneys about 10%. The digestive system about 10%. Now, our muscles in moderate activity can be up to 20% of our energy. Now, in really strenuous activities, obviously that can go way, way, way up, 80%. But at a resting level or something like that, the muscles are somewhere around less than 20%. If we're sitting at home, we're resting, and we're not really doing anything very, very difficult, how much energy does our brain need? 20% of our body's energy. At any given moment, right? if we're just kind of just sitting at home doing nothing and kind of watching some stupid television or whatever, it's about 20% of our brain is being activated, a huge amount of energy. And so what scientists think, the reason why we're so heavily influenced in our opinions by what we hear from other people is that the fact that because our brain uses a bunch of energy, we look for shortcuts. I don't want to have to go up and down my stairs several times a day. You know, when I work here at the Ethical Society, I'm constantly going back downstairs, going back upstairs, going back downstairs, and stuff. Our brain doesn't want to do that. And so part of what our brain does is say, what's the quickest, easiest way I can get all the things I need to do done in a day? And part of that is I'm just going to short circuit and I'm going to listen to what other people say and I'm going to go with that, what we call in biology the law of parsimony. Right? The simplest, easiest, lowest efficient way of processing information is often what the brain does. And we often don't stop, reflect, write things down, process through information, and do the kind of hard work that we really often need into decision making. And that's the point of his book, is that we need thinking, both kind of fast thinking, but we also need slow thinking in the ways that we process information, especially about the things that matter. He talks about several things that we could do better, which is relying on a better sense of statistics, and he means really good statistics, not just the quick kind of trashy things that we often people throw out, which are nothing more than confirmation bias. That often what we need are independent observers. Now, if you're married, you often turn to someone and say, well, I'm thinking about this, what do you think? And then you fight about it for an hour and a half. But that kind of interplay and interaction between that kind of decision making, but how important that is. They often talk about the difficulty that people have when they've recently lost a spouse. And they say, it's like a part of me died. Well, part of you also died because half of your information, which you shared with the other people, is now gone, right? Where did the laundry, how much does the water bill and how does water get paid and what's my cousin's name and all this kind of stuff. We actually share collectively information with one another in deep relationships. And when we lose that person, we actually lose part of our entire kind of information as well. Now, we have another bias called casual thinking bias he talks about. And what often happens is an event happens, and then the pundits kind of reflect on it and say, the reason why this happened is because of this. The reason why the stock market went up is because there was a run on this. The reason why people did these things, this kind of stuff. And humans are drawn to that kind of information. You must be an expert. You've got it all figured out. Every time I come to you, you've got a very good answer. And that person says, well, let me unpack this for you. Here's what happened beforehand, and this is what exactly happening. And their information is spot on. And we go, yes, that's a brilliant analysis. That makes sense. But if you ask that person to predict what's going to happen next, how much better are they than the average person? How much better is a pundit? It's right. Even in the most sophisticated experts may be only 7% better than a coin flip. Now, that's why things like happen in the election where people, oh, no, we are very, very, very bad at predicting what's going to happen. Because the difficulty we have also as human is there's too much variability out there, right? Some things happen, things are going to be happening, and it's very, very hard to make true predictions off of that. And so therefore we rely we often are very good at after the fact, the armchair quarterback at the end of that of saying exactly what happened, but we're terrible at making predictions because the world is too much in flux and too variable. So we try to find some solutions to this. One solution is let's just create a bunch of rules, right? We could find a bunch of rules, and other people said, no, we don't need rules because those get stuck and we get repeating bad rules and this situation doesn't work for them. What we need are standards, which means we need some flexibility and all this kind of stuff. Rules are actually better at making decisions. Something happened, you pay a fine, don't do that, stop. But standards are fuzzy once again. And once we get back into standards of trying to think of efficiency, we're all over everywhere once again, and it's very difficult. Which political group, conservatives or progressives, rely most on rules or standards? Would you say? I'll answer the question. It's about the same, right? We actually both rely on rules. We want good things. You will not do that. We were going to protect these people's rights. We want to do that. You can imagine progressives happy about that. But also that we want some kind of flexibilities. We want some kind of standards to do that. Standards are great. However, they're extremely noisy. They're full and prone to error. And we have not been able to find some really good do that. Now, finding the truth is very important to us, right? We needed to make informed decisions. We needed to maintain trust, right? This is what it is, and this is what's happening. We need to also protect us against manipulation and that bias, I said, that gets built into the system. We also need truth in order to support progress. We need to know that we were here and we've done these kinds of works and we're right there. And unfortunately, we often don't know what those things are as well, and we get tripped up. So here we find ourselves. And I think this happens to us at kind of every single day of us trying to decide what we're going to decide, how we're going to find what's important. Today, after the platform, we're going to have a break here right now. We're going to have a little bit of social hour, but we're engaged in a new project here at the Ethical Society called the National Ethical Indicators, which is our SOUP symposium. I'm talking about it again today, in which we're trying to explore what is the signal? What is the thing that we're looking for? How could we advance progressiveness? How can we make a difference in the world when there's so much noise? And what does it mean when we say that we want our nation to be ethical? I hope sometime, and we're going to be doing this every single month, I keep coming back to this, but every single month I hope you join us in the room as we try to explore what those things are. Because I really think it's worth discussing. The problem is we have all of these fears about what's going on and what's happening in the United States, and we say something about that is unethical. We have to be able to put our finger on that thing. The thing, not the noise, not the bias, but our finger on what essentially is truth about what we're doing, what needs to change. Otherwise, nothing else happens. Thank you all.
To learn more about us, visit our website, ethicalfocus.org, or email us at admin@ethicalfocus.org, and we'll get back to you. To make a donation, go to ethicalfocus.org/donate. Please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and you can watch many of our past programs on our YouTube channel.